We're here today on this beautiful 4th of July 2018 with the backdrop of where the ancient Phoenicians, the ancient Greeks landed and created this culture. I'm here with Dr. King. He is the author of Existence, Thought, Style, Perspectives of a Primary Relation. He's a futurist as well as a psychoanalyst. In fact, Dr. King, among other things, was the first on the national as well as international scene to predict election of Trump, inauguration of Trump, and more importantly, even what Trump would be doing with his administration. I mean, your predictions are of metallic precision, and I've watched this for 25 years. That's how long we know each other and have worked, and he is the foremost futurist. Welcome again.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, we will be talking about a whole range of subjects, books that you brought by yourself, by others, and here is this beautiful essay by Dr. Deborah Herman. And the quote is, I quote, "One who sees the mystery, one who can see the manifestations." Dr. King, a genius and healer among us. A brilliant essay yet to be published in a few weeks. Welcome.
I'm very happy to be here, Michael, especially in this setting, this great historical, ancient setting, and thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. What is the future? Where do you want to take us today?
It's personal. I know that President Trump has the capacity, in contrast to other presidents. They always kept with protocol. The protocol was very restrictive. He has the ability to work one-on-one because of his entrepreneurial background,
yes.
Highly successful, to be able to work out an economic alliance, a new economic alliance that I have been advocated with the other countries.
So the Vinci Peace Plan is primarily economy, trade, friendship, prosperity.
Yes. It's a tectonic shift from our focus on Europe,
yes,
which has its own problems and is very slow to respond to the needs of contemporary man. It still has the opportunity to respond,
yes.
But there's a tectonic cultural and economic shift to China and potentially North Korea, which could lead to a denuclearization in that area.
Yes, and then from there to a economic success story.
For peace and prosperity, which then will gradually proliferate further, including India.
Yes. So, this to say, Dr. King's not only looking at the future, he's actually making suggestions. And since we're at this point now, you have seen my work about 2020, and I said about the astrology, the Capricorn super alignment. Mm-hmm. How do you see this going into 2020?
Well, I actually see this to be successful. I think all the elements are there for a profound intersection, yes, of the most important insights. And I think that, for example, Kim Jong-un, I think the rocket man persona has played itself out. I think he needs economic help. I think that we are creating a level playing ground for trade, and there has been for a while, and I predict of a major influx of cultural influence.
Yes, that is the Da Vinci idea behind.
Yeah, it is the Da Vinci idea.
The conflict by
yes, the Da Vinci idea took place. It was conceived in the 15th century by Da Vinci, and basically his idea was to create a navigable river, the river Nada, mm-hmm, so that trade and culture could extend from Milan to Lake Como, yes, and therefore avert war through trade and cultural exchange. Yes. And those manuscripts they remain in the museum in the Baghi Museum in Milan, mm-hmm, but they haven't been implemented in other areas.
Yeah.
And I had the idea that why couldn't the same principle be applied in a contemporary, the contemporary world?
Yeah, and on a grand scale.
And on a grand
Because
scale.
afterwards, when that phase is done, one could apply the same template
Yes.
to everything else.
Yes, because the template itself encompasses what we know about human nature and what we know about the evolution of nations as they ascend,
Yes, yes.
and what to avoid as far as descension.
Yes. Dr. King is also the author of a well-respected series at Newsmax called Inside the Mind of World Leaders, which, by the way, the expression was then copied by others. But Dr. King has been the first, as often, in analyzing what's actually going on in special situations. And for instance, you had correctly assessed Obama, then I believe Gaddafi, Kim in North Korea, Trump of course. And this is a fascinating subject, Inside the Mind of World Leaders.
Mm-hmm. Yes, well, I approach all of these leaders without political preconceptions or political leanings. I have no political agenda.
Yes, it's parapolitical.
And so, which allows me to make political prophecies, predictions more accurately, because I don't have an axe to grind. One of the first one was the one Inside the Mind of Obama, and I analyzed his childhood, being raised by his grandmother and mother, the absentee father, and linked this with what later would become his policies. I analyzed both his books, and also with regard to mistakes he made, both insights, also mistakes. One of the mistakes being bombing Libya.
Yeah.
And opening up a vacuum. So from there, when I wrote an article on Gaddafi, Inside the Mind of Gaddafi, later,
Yes.
it was republished because I had predicted that how he would behave during the
I remember
crisis.
that very well.
And they had republished it and said that I was the only one on the international scene who got it right. He wasn't going to escape from his country. He wasn't going to leave. I linked this up with the Bedouin and Berber background,
Yes.
and those of that orientation who he surrounded in his cabinet. So it was I think they missed
Yes.
what he was really about. So Newsmax republished my article, giving me credit for that.
Very good. And then the next one you did?
I did
Looking
one.
to?
I did one on Kim Jong-un,
Kim.
and again, that was at a time when the mainstream press was saying, well, you know, he's crazy. He's saying this and he's doing that with the nuclear weapons and everything. And I said, no, he's not crazy. There is if you look more deeply into the economy and into his psychological background, you'll see that there's a rationale there.
Yes.
And
he's trying to break out of the mold.
and I have observed that he is trying to break out of that mode. Mm-hmm. He's probably the most Western in essence, the most Western of any leader of North Korea.
Yes, he was brought up in Switzerland.
Yes, his taste in music is like that. His father were very worried about him because when he was studying in Switzerland, I believe,
Yes.
he had adopted Western ways, music and reading and friends. So the groundwork there, psychological
Yes.
groundwork, was present, and one had to only, in my view, tap into it. And the historical moment was right because they can't keep sending missiles up, nuclear missiles, because the reason they are doing that is not only to intimidate, they were trying to sell their wares. And they were selling their wares to Libya and Syria were the main. Well, Libya and Syria are not. It's not working out, and that's not helping their economy. So what we needed, in my view, was a shift from a military economy to a consumer economy, which, interesting enough, incrementally has been taking place in China.
Yes.
So if you connect the dots, we bring China in on this. America being the great entrepreneur, I felt the time was right to forward a new proposal for a new economic and cultural alliance and political alliance.
Yes. No, it's far-sighted. This is a time for the far-sighted people, because we're moving astrologically, as I explained, into this new time, the next 2 years, into 2020 and then beyond, where I also see the structure of everything changing. The whole world is going through a deep transformation. I think though this is also caused by shifting dimensions, which is a more interdimensional astrology. It's not just the planets and how they align, but maybe the magnetics that change the way we wake up thinking. Then you weren't going to be part of it. That's an interesting story that you can say.
Yeah.
Okay. So, my plan was to step in the car, go up the park, and then Heath and I walk in, I have to pay. Is it working? Is everything working? Yes. And then we pay, I pay, and we go in, and you will then see us. You will then have visual contact with us so we can tell you what we're doing. And you, can you say something, He's still measuring here.
Yes. Yes, I would.
Can you hear
like
him?
to be able to talk a little bit about Einstein.
Yes.
And his preface to the book Mental Radio by Upton Sinclair. Very few people know about this, but he talked about the unconscious influences between individuals and the form of communication, which is conveyed in a way that we're not conscious of, and that this is the way of the future. He suggested that we study this more intently.
Yes.
Because we're really onto something. And in an interview with Antonia Valentin, he spoke of human emanations of which we are ignorant, and he said, you remember how skeptical everybody was about electrical currents and invisible waves.
That's Tesla.
So I would make the analogy with that.
That's
Einstein
right.
makes the analogy.
Yes.
And of course, later on, when you
we go in tomorrow. Okay.
We will then tomorrow go into the way of the explorer.
Yes. Okay.
And Edgar Mitchell, because he takes it further in what Einstein's talking about here. He actually does in actual experimentation.
Yes,
then he sets up the Institute for Noetic Sciences.
Yes.
And how this actually affects what we're talking about, and how my mind is able to predict, because what I am doing, I express it in an analytical way, only for others to understand.
Yes.
But it begins with an intuition.
Exactly.
And the intuition cannot be defined.
Exactly. That's how we are.
And if this is the real stuff of things, not the political arguments.
Yeah. That's right. That's my plan. That's what we're going to. Your most formative years, which exile is anyway a big subject, exile, you met some of the most important people. You met Doris Lessing, Jean-Paul Sartre, and R.D. Laing. You studied with R.D. Laing.
Yes.
Take us through these people you met in England. That was in your English phase, right?
Yes, that was in the early part of my exile. I actually was living in London when I met Doris Lessing. She lived in the same borough where I did for a short time. And I only met her very briefly. As someone, a mutual author, a friend of hers, had asked me if I would bring her some flowers. So I rang her doorbell and she answered, and we chatted for a while. But it wasn't. That was not a long liaison. I was about that time, a little bit later. I was studying with R.D. Laing, who was the foremost psychoanalyst in introducing the humane approach in psychoanalysis, and criticizing the overuse of medication and electric shock treatment. So that was an interesting period. The most important person that I had met during that period was H.W. Cassira, who is the philosopher and the translator of the Bible from ancient Greek into English, and he was a German exile from Nazi Germany. So,
how did
Sartre,
you then go to South?
Yeah, the Sartre was. I was in Paris. I had an idea. This was towards the end of the Vietnam War, and I had an idea that to ask him for an open letter to the American people from him, as he was a very well-known philosopher and author, and he had received the Nobel Prize for Literature, which he rejected because he felt it was irrelevant.
Oh yes, he too got it, like Lessing.
Yes, yes, they both did.
And he rejected?
He rejected just because he felt it was irrelevant for his life mission. So I met him at his apartment. I met Simone de Beauvoir, and we had a very interesting discussion. He actually said, if you would like to, I'm going to compose the letter. If you want to make any changes because it's your cause, please do so. And I read the letter he wrote, and I didn't see that any changes were necessary. And he was a humble thinker, and he said, would you like any other French intellectuals to sign this letter besides myself? And I said, no, I think your signature will do. Of course, Simone de Beauvoir was sitting across the way, and
you were meeting them both together?
Yeah, she was pretending to read Le Monde newspaper. But no, it was a very good talk, and he followed through.
Yes.
And then I sent it to the New York Times, translated it, sent it to the New York Times, and they published it in the New York Review of Books. And that was actually 2 years before the amnesty was granted.
Yes.
And he had written on behalf of the amnesty movement, saying that history had proven us right. And later, the McNamara, Secretary of Defense McNamara, the architect of the war, wrote a book saying, you know what, the war was immoral. The Gulf of Tonkin resolution, that was something that was invented, and we were never attacked. It was a way of getting us involved in the war, and that it was a political disaster. He admitted it himself. So basically, what I had that insight way back years ago, that I didn't believe the reason was valid for getting in the war.
But it would take Sartre,
and then Sartre would carry through later to convince the United States of the necessity of an amnesty to begin anew.
Well done.